Okay, so I'm here to reflect on kind of the entire semester of evidence-based practice. And I did kind of have to go back and review my journey to Oz, kind of remember what my thought process was then and the answers of the clinicians that I interviewed. So, what I've learned the most so far is the overall importance of clinical expertise and patient values as aspects of evidence-based practice. When I interviewed Jody, who was a classmate of mine in my undergraduate, I think we both had this idea that we had a fairly solid grasp on evidence-based practice. So we had 7 a.m. meetings every single Wednesday morning for 3 years straight, and that to us was the topic. That was why we were doing this, was evidence-based practice. But I have recently, this whole semester realized and recently contacted her telling her we only skimmed the surface. So we were mostly focused on how to search databases. And Pico questions was something we did quite a bit, so I was fairly comfortable creating one of those when it was brought up this semester. But as far as synthesizing evidence, deciphering what's good evidence, what's bad evidence, I think was something I was not exposed to very much in my undergraduate degree. So as much as I think what we did was good, they didn't talk about patient-based outcomes at all, so patient values were non-existent, I think, in my mind. So that has been an entirely new world for me, and it's been kind of interesting to understand, where my experience has lacked in comparison to other people's undergraduate degrees. And obviously I knew that would happen, but sometimes I think it can make us as students a little self-conscious on where our weaknesses and strengths are. So what evidence-based practice means to me now is not just the evidence, because that was really previously my only interaction with evidence-based practice, but to the whole patient body care, or whole body approach to patient care and clinical expertise. I don't think that our clinical expertise was really discussed at all. And I think that's one of my biggest questions, concerns, struggles now, is deciding where my clinical expertise is, because I've only been practicing for 2 years. I don't think I really have the ability to say, well, I've seen this work. I also have only, even since my senior year of undergraduate, only working in a high school population. So I'm still struggling with wanting to have a textbook or a research article tell me, no, this is the best way that you should be doing this. Instead of me saying, well, I've had this patient respond really well to it, I like it, it works really well for me. I'm just not sure I have that experience yet enough for me to be confident in telling another clinician, hey, maybe you should try this. So that's where I'm still struggling. How I'm going to implement this into my practice, I think, is going to be extremely easy. So I've absolutely loved learning about, statistical analysis, creating my own clinical bottom lines based off more than just one research article. So one thing I know that I actually want to do, and I'm not sure why I didn't do this for my original PICO question in the first place, was physical tests for meniscal injuries. I have not found one that has been in my clinical practice that has been positive in all of my meniscus injuries. I just really struggle with evaluating that, because I cannot find one that can decipher if a patient does or doesn't have one. I've missed those injuries. I thought I was 100% sure someone had a meniscal tear and then they didn't. So finding where the evidence says, maybe this cluster, if these ones are negative, these ones are positive, gives you the greatest likelihood that you can rule a meniscus tear in or out, would be really helpful. But also starting to implement that and deciding for myself what tests I perform the best, what tests work the best for me and my population. I know evidence-based practice in general is kind of, I think, what you were asking about implementing into practice, but that specifically is something I think I want to do very soon. What I still have questions about, like I said before, is where I can draw the line. So are positive patient feedback alone enough to implement a new technique into my practice? Is my clinical experience alone enough to implement something into my clinical practice? Because I think some of the conversations and discussion boards and just with other classmates, they kind of think it is. And I still struggle with that because I don't think that it is. And in my interview with my clinician who'd been practicing for longer than 10 years, she kind of said that. She kind of said that young professionals tend to focus so much on the literature that they kind of disregard the other aspects of evidence-based practice. And I kind of, unfortunately, think I'm one of those people. I really want evidence to tell me yes or no, or this is how you should do it, this is how you should not do it. So I'm struggling with balancing it all, I think. And I think that that's going to just come with years of experience. I'm going to start being more confident. I'm going to start having, you know, those things that work really well for me. But right now, I don't think that I have that. So what I'm most proud of, I think, is the ability to understand literature. So in my undergraduate degree, and unfortunately, I'll admit this, I think that unknowingly I manipulated some evidence. So when I was looking for literature, I didn't do any type of 5-step method for reading an article, even if I was probably told to in my undergraduate degree. And so I would look, I'm researching a topic, so I would look in their conclusion paragraph, and if there was one sentence that said exactly what I was looking for, I would cite that article, and that's wonderful. So what I'm really proud of is my ability this semester. I have printed off just about every article that I've needed so that I could highlight things, I could put question marks next to things, I could look things up in the dictionary. So I think that I have had a good discipline as far as making sure I'm understanding everything that's involved in the article. Yeah, I'm really proud of that because I'm understanding statistical importance based on clinic or in comparison to clinical importance, how they kind of relate to each other, and actually putting strong emphasis on the limitations of an article so I can decide how much weight I can put this article or these conclusions on my clinical bottom line. So how much can I really rely on this information? Instead of, like I said, just manipulating it and being like, oh great, they came to this conclusion, wonderful, cite it, done. You know, so I think that that's a big difference. And I've had to stay very disciplined in order to do that. I think I've already kind of discussed my biggest challenge, even in the on-campus weekend, which I absolutely loved. But I guess maybe I'm just either a little bit more of a skeptic or just a little less confident in my skills than some other students. But I feel like a lot of them have these techniques or these things that didn't have evidence, but they feel so passionate that they work. And I don't think I feel that way about anything yet. So I had a clinician, I think you might remember, who used primal reflex release technique. That worked wonders on that volleyball team. Like, those girls went from, I don't think I can practice today, till full out, let's do this, you know? And as much as I saw it work under one preceptor who believed in it, loved it, and one team, I don't feel confident enough to say, I'm going to use that, or tell another clinician, you should probably use that. So like I said, maybe I'm just a little more skeptical, but that's definitely something I'm going to eventually need to overcome. So I'm going to need to be more confident in my skills. One thing I've really had to reflect on, as much as I absolutely adore the high school population, I think that the environment of a high school athletic training room and the environment of a collegiate athletic training room are very different. As far as in the collegiate setting, I think athletic trainers are the primary source of healthcare. So every bump, every bruise, every rash, and every injury, because it's a little more intimate of a setting, you just have one team generally, or a smaller amount of athletes, you're going to know about it. In a high school setting, I don't think it's as much like that, and obviously some high schools might be, but in my experience, you get a lot more, well, they come in after they went to the doctor, or I'm going to physical therapy here, or the chiropractor, or the massage therapist. So I'm not sure that they use us to the potential that they could. So what I'm concerned I've allowed myself to do is kind of get comfortable. So when I'm not the primary healthcare provider, or I'm not the one, if we're coming into a roadblock in rehab or treatment, I have not relied solely on myself to come up with a solution. So I think I've never been forced to step outside of my comfort zone or the comfort zone of the person I was working under. So this is kind of everything we do. So I've never had, someone say, well, maybe we should look into this technique. Let's try this today. Unfortunately, I just haven't encountered people I've worked under that were like that. And I think in the collegiate setting, a lot of times you have GAs or, athletic trainers who are still doing a lot of research, and so they're trying this and trying that, and that was my experience with the primal reflex. She was still a graduate student, so I think she was still honing in on her practice. So in the last 2 years, like I said, I've practiced on my own. So I didn't have someone to be like, hey, can you look at this? What do you think? What would you do? So I think I got into some easy habits. I'm not saying they were bad habits, but I just didn't force myself to step outside of my comfort zone because I didn't need to. So that is going to be my biggest challenge in proceeding with evidence-based practice, is trying new things based on the literature or based on other people's clinical expertise or based on the fact that my patient really loves it. So now I'm going to start implementing it into my clinical practice so I can come to my own conclusions about whether or not it works. So overall, this class has been wonderful, and I'm excited to continue to our research classes so I can learn more about data analysis and being able to understand and search for those things so I can start to answer these questions on my own.